Recently, the Nigerian government reported a stunning economic turnaround. Nigeria's financial war chest is finally overflowing, hitting a staggering $41 billion, its highest level since 2021. Now, this isn't just a slow trickle of cash. Nigeria's foreign reserve skyrocketed by nearly $1.5 billion in just 3 weeks this August. To put that into perspective, Nigeria now has enough cash on hand to cover almost 10 months of everything it imports, blowing past the 3 months safety net that experts recommended. So, what's the secret behind this massive cash injection? The answer is simple. The oil is finally flowing again. After decades of being crippled by industrial-scale oil theft, a relentless security crackdown in the Niger Delta is finally paying off. Oil production has surged to nearly 1.8 million barrels per day, and the state oil company is now boasting that its pipelines are close to 100% secure from oil thieves. Now, this isn't just good news. It's a potential game changer. Projections show the reserve could swell well over $45 billion by the end of 2025. Now, for everyday Nigerians and the wider continent, this signals a powerful boost of confidence for investors, a more stable naira, and crucial breathing room for the government to fund reforms and build critical infrastructure. Although it's a fragile recovery, but it's the most powerful sign yet that Nigeria might finally be turning the corner. What you've just heard is the official story. As you already know, here in Frontline Africa, we don't do the official story. We go behind the headlines. We go behind what the government is saying, and we go right straight into what is happening on ground, right here in Nigeria. So what you've just heard is the official report, but my job here is to tell you what is on ground. So that's exactly what I'm going to do, because Nigeria, one of Africa's top oil producers, is bleeding wealth. Nigeria has bled wealth, is currently bleeding wealth, and will continue to bleed wealth until something drastic changes. Because between 2009 and 2020, over 600 million barrels of its oil supply vanished into thin air. A mind-blowing loss valued at more than $46 billion. Now, this is no petty theft. It's colossal, industrial-scale theft of a nation's lifeblood, masterminded by sophisticated international crime rings. But the real enemy isn't just overseas, because right here in Nigeria, a powerful domestic cabal, a so-called oil mafia, has grown fabulously wealthy for decades by keeping Nigeria dependent on imported fuel, getting rich off a corrupt subsidy scam that cost the nation billions of dollars. Now, in the midst of all this chaos, one man's audacious $20 billion gamble is threatening to shatter this entire rotten empire. I'm talking about the Dangote refinery, the largest of its kind on earth. This isn't just a refinery. It's an open declaration of war on the old guard. And you can be sure that they will fight back, and they are fighting back with a vengeance, using every dirty trick in the book to protect their own empire. Now, this is the story of Nigeria's war on two fronts for its very economic soul. Because in this episode, we are going to drag the shadowy networks plundering Nigeria's wealth into the limelight, expose how one man's mega project is threatening to burn their empire to the ground, and review why the outcome of this high-stakes battle will define not just the future of energy in Nigeria, but in West Africa and Africa as a whole. Let's get into it. Now, the theft of Nigeria's oil is a well-oiled machine, a global criminal enterprise that starts in the swamps of the Niger Delta and ends up in gas tanks all over the world. Even the Nigerian government admits they aren't just fighting local thieves, but specialized international syndicates running a multi-billion-dollar-a-year racket. It all begins with a dangerous process called hot tapping, where skilled crews will tap directly into high-pressure pipelines to siphon crude. Now, from there, the stolen oil is loaded onto barges, sneaking through a maze of creeks to meet massive tankers waiting on the international waters. Now, this fuels a full-blown crisis of petrol piracy in the Gulf of Guinea, which has become one of the most dangerous stretches of water on earth. Now, these aren't your typical movie pirates. They are heavily armed, highly organized crews who hijack oil tankers with military precision. Now, once the oil is on the high seas, it vanishes into a shadowy global market. Now, investigations have traced this stolen Nigerian crude to refineries and ports in the United States, Brazil, and across Europe. Now, the billions in profit are then laundered through the world's biggest financial centers. I'm talking about Dubai, London, and Switzerland, using share companies. It's a parallel global supply chain of crude oil built on corruption, robbing a nation blind while the world profits. But as shocking as this global theft is, the real enemy might be just much, much closer home. Now, while international gangs drain Nigeria from the outside, a far more venomous threat is eating it from within. Aliko Dangote, I'm talking about the man who built the giant refinery, gave this threat a chilling name, the oil mafia. He calls them more deadly than the Mexican drug cartel because they are everywhere. A powerful network of fuel importers, marketers, and their powerful friends in government who got rich off a broken system. Because for decades, Nigeria has lived a bizarre paradox. It's a top oil producer that has to import nearly all of its own petrol that they consume domestically. Now, this was made possible by a massively corrupt government subsidy system. Think of it this way. A government investigation found that while the country was using 35 million liters of fuel per day, the government was paying subsidies for 59 million liters. Now, that's an extra 24 million liters per day. Pure profit for the cartels, who created fake import documents or smuggled the cheap fuel to sell in other countries. Now, this scam created a new set of billionaires in Nigeria, whose entire fortune depended on Nigeria never refining its own crude oil. They thrived on the nation's dysfunction. So, when Dangote refinery came along, promising to make Nigeria 100% self-sufficient, it wasn't just a business competitor. It was an existential threat aimed at destroying the very foundation of their power and wealth. And then the game changed forever because a colossal $20 billion mega-refinery rose up in the coast of Lagos, the largest single-train refinery on the planet. The Dangote refinery is an industrial beast capable of pumping out 650,000 barrels of fuel per day. Now, that's more than enough to supply all of Nigeria and turn the country into a major fuel exporter. Now, on paper, is the ultimate solution. It's projected to save the country well over $12 billion a year in foreign currency, create over 100,000 jobs, and finally end the national shame of an oil-rich country having to import its own petrol. Now, for Pan-Africans and the diaspora, the refinery became a powerful symbol of what Africa can build for itself. A direct challenge to the old colonial model of exporting raw resources only to buy back finished products at a premium. Now, by creating value at home, the Dangote refinery was designed to keep African wealth within Africa. But by building this monument of self-sufficiency, Dangote wasn't just building a business. He was picking a fight with the most powerful and entrenched cartel in the country. And this mafia wasn't about to let their multi-billion-dollar empire crumble without a vicious, dirty fight. What they did next is almost unbelievable. Now, the war against the Dangote refinery wasn't fought with guns, but with something far more effective: bureaucracy and market manipulation. The first move, according to Dangote himself, was to starve the refinery of crude oil. He claims international oil companies in Nigeria flat out refused to sell him local crude, or they jacked up the prices so high it was actually cheaper for him to import oil from America. Let that sink in. A Nigerian refinery built to process Nigerian oil was forced to import crude from the United States. Next, the attacks went public. The head of Nigeria's own energy regulatory agency claimed the refinery was unfinished and that its diesel was dirty and low quality. Now, this led to a dramatic public showdown. A test was done right in front of Nigeria's lawmakers at the National Assembly because Dangote's diesel had a sulfur content of just 87 parts per million. Now, the imported diesel they were defending, over 1,800, more than 20 times dirtier and more toxic. But the most explosive allegation pointed to a tiny European island, Malta, because Dangote himself claimed that powerful figures in the import mafia owned a plant in Malta that was blending cheap, low-quality fuel, specifically to dump on the Nigerian market. Now, trade data seems to back him up because Nigeria's fuel import from Malta mysteriously shot up from zero to over $2 billion in a single year, right as his refinery was about to come online. Now, to truly understand why this web of corruption and sabotage can exist, you have to go to its source, the poison lands of the Niger Delta, because for over 60 years, this region has been the site of what many called an ecocide. It's one of the most oil-polluted places on earth, having suffered the equivalent of 50 Exxon Valdez disasters. Now, decades of oil spills and gas flaring has poisoned the water, destroyed farmland, and wiped out the vast mangrove forests that were once the lifeblood of the local economy. Now, for the millions of people who have always lived by farming and fishing, their way of life has been systematically annihilated. The fish that are left often smell of crude oil. The yam and cassava grow stunted and withered from toxic soil. Now, this environmental destruction has created a deep well of desperation. With no other way to survive, young people are drawn into illicit oil economy, working for the very networks that steal the oil and run dangerous makeshift refineries. Now, there is a powerful saying in the Niger Delta: stealing oil isn't theft, it's just drinking from your own well. It's a sentiment born from generations of watching trillions of dollars in wealth get pumped from under your own feet, while they were left with nothing but poverty and pollution. This grievance is the fuel that keeps the entire criminal engine running. So, how is the Nigerian state fighting back against this industrial scale theft? Officially, they are claiming a massive victory, as I previously reported at the opening segment. The National Oil Company boasts that its pipeline, which once lost up to 80% of their oil, are now receiving nearly 100% of what's pumped into them. But when you look closer at how they achieve this, a very troubling picture emerges. The core of their new strategy is to outsource security. And who did they hire to protect the pipelines? The very powerful ex-militant leaders who once terrorized the region. Now, these lucrative multi-million-dollar contracts are being slammed by critics as nothing more than a payment for peace, a thinly veiled bribe to the most powerful players. In essence, the state is paying the poachers to become the gamekeepers. This creates a fragile transactional peace. It's a protection economy where security isn't a right provided by the state, but a service you buy from the local strongman. This doesn't solve the root problem. It just papers over the cracks with cash. It also makes these ex-militants even more powerful and indispensable, because the peace lasts only as long as the money keeps flowing, and it has sparked new violent conflict between rival groups fighting for a piece of this contract. Now, the pipelines may be safe for now, but this peace has been bought, not built. Now, this high-stakes battle inside Nigeria is sending shockwaves across the globe. The Dangote refinery is already flipping the script on a century of colonial economics. It's systematically kicking Europe's highly profitable $17 billion a year business of selling refined fuel back to Africa to the curb. For the first time, West Africa has its own reliable local source of high-quality fuel, a massive step towards continental energy independence. The refinery is now being seen as a blueprint for the rest of the continent, proof that private sector-led industrialization can break the cycle of exporting raw materials and importing poverty. But this new reality raises the stakes for everyone, because for years, regional bodies like the African Union and ECOWAS have talked about energy integration. But this game-changing shift was driven by one man, not by the policy. Now, the entire region's energy security is becoming dependent on a single facility in Nigeria. A pipeline attack in the Niger Delta is no longer just Nigeria's problem. It's a potential crisis for Ghana, for Togo, and far beyond. The Dangote saga has exposed the dirty secret and deep corruption holding Nigeria back, but it has also ignited a powerful new vision of what's possible. A future where Africa controls its own resources, builds its own industries, and finally charts its own destiny. The war is far from over, but the game just changed forever. Now, if you have watched to this point, I want to say a big thank you to you. This is Frontline Africa, where we go beyond the official story and tell you exactly what is happening on ground in every topic that we cover, whether it is in Nigeria, whether it is in West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, everywhere in Africa is our beat. We cover it. If you find this content valuable and you want it to reach more people that are interested in what is happening, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa, help us amplify this message. Drop your comments, like this video, and tell us what you know about this particular issue that I'm talking about, because I don't know the whole story. I only know a side of the story, and that's the side of the story I just told. So if you know more about what is happening in Nigeria's oil sector, drop it in the comment section. And if you want to see more of our video, maybe consider to subscribe and turn up those notifications. I am your host, Ezike Enejeta, and I will see you in the next one.